Welcome, everybody. This is Justin Deschamps from Stillness in the Storm, and we have started the stream for August 19th, 2021. Got a lot to talk about today. I haven't done one of these in almost a month now, and for pretty good reason. I've got a lot of people wondering what happened because I put a pretty provocative title up there. I got COVID. What does that mean? Wait a minute. I thought COVID didn't exist, or maybe it does, or maybe it hasn't been isolated, but there's something out there that's making people, what the hell's going on? Well, we're going to talk a good chunk about it because now I have some firsthand experience to draw from. So we're going to talk about that. In the first part, I'm also going to discuss with you a whole bunch of news. I probably won't get to everything that I pulled for today, just because there's so much going on and we haven't done anything for a while. But we've got lots of great stuff. So we're going to get into a little bit about this infrastructure bill. We're going to discuss Marjorie Taylor Greene saying she's going to file impeachment. We're going to discuss Special Forces Director talking about Joe Biden has to resign. So big things are happening. Some things with Twitter, China taking a financial stake in TikTok, some things that Donald Trump been doing. So we got some good news for you here. And in the private section, I'm going to try to cover as much as I can. There is something called devolution out there, which is something we've actually already discussed on the show. It's not on YouTube, but if you go to the Rumble, which you can do, by the way, if you're on YouTube, just go into the description. You can get to the Rumble channel. In there, you are going to find a video about, I got to be careful what I say here on YouTube, but let me pull it up. I'll actually pop it into the chat when we get started. But we've covered some of this idea of the plan and contingency plans for the continuity of government. So that we discussed back, I think it was like a month after the inauguration. And that has, I don't know when this guy, Patel Patriot, started talking about this stuff, but he has been making the rounds. And so I want to discuss some of that with y'all. And just give me a moment. I'm trying to find that video. Where is it? Here we go. That's the one. All right, so I'm going to pop this into the chat for everybody. That way you can have a decent look at some of this stuff. When it comes to this whole like contingency plan and the plan, there's some things there that you really need to wrap your head around carefully. So that's a huge conversation. Like I said, I'm probably not going to be able to cover the entire subject in this round because I just started my review of the whole devolution article series, but we'll have plenty to talk about. I also wanted to talk to you about some ways to deal with the Rona that I'm not even going to try to mention on the YouTube stream, but if you're interested, stick around for the Zoom chat. If you want to participate in the private Zoom chat via Subscribestar, it's only $3 a month. Just go into the description of the YouTube video, look for the Subscribestar link to the Stillness in the Storm page. As little as $3 a month, you can have access to the full stream. I'll post the notes so you can see the links and everything that I'm going to be talking about, and you'll have it all there for you. It's something that a lot of people like to do and really enjoy. So, and it helps support me and the work we're doing at Stillness. I also wanted to mention as an announcement that in the next month, probably more like 2 months, there's going to be a whole new project into the form of media. I'm going to have some people work with me. It's going to hopefully be a kind of like Joe Rogan style or Timcast IRL style podcast where I have some other people with me. We'll be talking about news. We'll be talking about awesome topics. Should be really great. This is something that I've been trying to get off the ground for a while now. And I think finally I've got all the pieces in place. So that should be really, I'm really excited about that. So keep your eye open for that. It probably won't start until sometime in October, because before I could do all of that, I have to move. This is another thing that I've been dealing with over the past few weeks. while also being sick. So I'm going to pop this video into the chat. It is in the chat on YouTube. I'm also going to pop it into the chat for everybody who's in Zoom. And then we're going to get this party started. Good to see everybody. Thanks, everybody, for the well wishes, by the way. I had an outpouring of support for the folks that I shared this with. I put it on my Subscribestar, so really appreciate that. I've had a lot of support in this regard. So, okay, so let's get into the first topic, and I'm just going to launch right into basically what has been going on. Well, the reason I didn't do a live stream for the first part of this month, which I was intending to do, is because I came down with something that people are calling COVID-19. Now, I didn't get tested, and that was intentional because I am leery to have a record in some database somewhere in the CDC or the World Health Organization or related government agency that shows that I have been tested positive for COVID, but I didn't get the vaccine because I haven't had the vaccine yet, and I don't plan on getting the vaccine. And there's some of this that I probably won't be able to say in the free, YouTube version because every time I mention the word vaccine or COVID or anything, even if I use election irregularities, invariably I get a strike on the channel and I have to fight it. And thankfully they lift it, which is kind of surprising. I figured YouTube would just like slam down the strikes and that way they can get rid of people like me, but they didn't. So who knows what that means. So I got COVID. So what happened? My fiance, she went to an event in Vegas, like a bridal shower. She came back. She wasn't feeling any symptoms, and then just after, I think it was the third day, she started to feel a little sick. This was on like a Friday, and then I didn't feel anything. She didn't even think it was anything too major because the symptoms weren't all that bad. She had like a little achiness and things like this, but not any severe symptoms like you would expect from a seemingly really nasty illness, right? Well, flash to Monday, and I wake up, I do my little workout routine, and I walk downstairs, and literally within like the space of 5 minutes, I went from feeling totally fine to having like full-blown body aches to the point where my feet were aching, like I was stepping on like gravel. If you ever stepped on gravel before, I mean, I do a lot of walking around barefoot, so my feet have been gotten pretty tough over the years. But even then, you walk on gravel, it's going to feel a little uncomfortable, and that's kind of what it felt like, but in like an achy kind of way. Like when you get a fever type of sickness, you feel achy all over, like just sitting in a chair or walking can feel, you have the soreness to your body. And part of the reason that's happening, I suspect, and I'm scientifically validated this, but this is my theory, that when you're in a fever situation, you have more inflammation, you have more of your opioid receptors, which are designed to not make you feel achy, basically, are probably being taken up and used up in the sense that the natural opioid, which is endorphins for your body, is being consumed. So that's kind of the theory I have, is that when you're feeling body aches, it's because all of the opioids your body produces to make it so that you're not just always uncomfortable. Because if you didn't have these natural opioids kind of like numbing you a little bit, then you'd be super sensitive to everything. And people who've had to deal with opioid addiction, like to OxyContin or Percocets or heroin, part of the reason you feel so crappy is because your body isn't producing natural opioids. And so you're feeling the full kind of brunt of what your nerves and the other sensory organs of your body are throwing at you. So anyway, so Monday, like I said, I walked downstairs. I started feeling really achy. My feet felt really achy, and I didn't know what was going on. Now, I don't normally get sick. Like prior to around 2014, in 2014, I started a health protocol that limited basically bad foods. I was eating a lot of probiotic food. I was doing a lot of biofeedback. And ever since 2014, I went to Morocco during that year. When I got to Morocco, we got what we're colorfully calling the Moroccan Revenge, which is basically like all these people, uh, getting really sick and having a kind of like food poisoning symptoms. And I got like a nasal congestion thing. It was really intense. Mind you, I think part of the reason it was so intense is that I had like a wisdom tooth that was not healthy, and so that was causing health issues. Because later, when I got my wisdom teeth removed, all of the related complications from these nasal kind of issues I've been dealing with went away. Anyway, the point is that I haven't been sick since 2014, really, with the exception of one other time in January 2020. I got sick for like 2 weeks. It was pretty darn intense, but that was nothing compared to what I felt over the past couple of weeks. So I had a lot of work to do. I had to finish an episode for Into the Storm. By the way, I'm doing awesome stuff on Into the Storm on now Rise.tv, and you can go there and Into the Storm usually pops right up, and they actually replace the image so you can see, my bearded face with the mustache is now the thing you can look for. So anyway, so I had a bunch of work to do, and I just took like an ibuprofen so I could get through it, and I just felt a little achy, and I thought it was just going to come and go quick. Sometimes I'll have like a 24-hour, what I generally refer to as like an immune system response. So there's sometimes when you feel feverish or achy, it's not because you're actually sick. Your immune system could have been triggered for any number of reasons. It could have been triggered because you actually did have exposure to some type of pathogen like a virus or bacteria, and then your body's just kind of like going into overdrive for a little bit to try to change the biochemical environment as a way to deal with the disease or to deal with the sickness. But sometimes it's because you've got a mold allergy. As a matter of fact, a lot of times when people have these seasonal sicknesses, it's not because they're actually sick, it's because of an allergy. So I thought that's what it was, because I do get that maybe like once every couple years. I'll have a 24-hour like kind of mild achy feverishness. I don't usually have like a lot of runny nose. I'm not like coughing up green phlegm or anything like that. So that's what I basically experienced for the first 2 days of this thing. On Wednesday, though, I woke up and man, I felt awful. Like I had this really nasty headache. Like sometimes these pressure headaches, usually because I eat late at night and I shouldn't. So over the years, I've noticed that if I eat like, I get the munchies at like 12 o'clock at night, which happens sometimes, I'm human, and I eat some more food than I should to the point where I feel full. And then if I go to sleep like a half hour later, then I'm going to probably wake up with a pressure headache. And a pressure headache is it feels mild at first, but then when you lean down, you feel like this like fluid rushing to your head, and then you get like a really kind of intense throbbing. And that's, like I said, what I call a pressure headache. So I woke up with probably the nastiest pressure headache I've ever felt. And I didn't eat food late last night or the night before. So I'm like, okay, what is going on here? I drink a bunch of water. I go downstairs and I'm like dizzy. I'm having a hard time concentrating, and I basically can't do anything. Now, thankfully, I didn't have a whole lot to do that day, but just to give you guys an idea of like what's kind of happening behind the scenes here is producing Into the Storm, as I've mentioned before, takes a lot of time between researching and writing the scripts, and then production and actually filming it and editing. It's minimum 40 hours a week. So often it ends up being more depending on how much in-depth research I got to do. So Tuesday is my like recovery day before I'm going right back into it on Wednesday and researching and writing. And ideally, I would like to have a whole bunch of scripts pre-written, but because of all the house hunting and everything I've been doing, I just haven't had a chance to like get that catch up to give myself a little cushion. So anyway, so Wednesday came around and I couldn't do anything. And then later that day, I laid on the couch. I got up and I was feeling really nauseous, and I ended up vomiting that day. Now, it's rare for me. I haven't had a sickness where I felt that sick in like 25 years. Like when I was, 6, 7, all the way up to 10 or 11, when I would get the flu, I'd often have some kind of stomach issue, but as time went on, it kind of disappeared. And then when I would get sick, I'd have more nasal issues. And that transition happened like at around like 10 or 11 years old. So I literally haven't, had a stomach flu type symptoms, nausea, for years, 25 years, something like that, because I'm 39 now. So, yeah, so I ended up vomiting that night, and I just felt like I said, I couldn't think. Like, normally when I'm sick, like when I was really sick in 2020 or when I was really sick in 2014, I could still think. I mean, I could read books, I could, watch videos, I could write, I could do all sorts of stuff. I'd be sick, I wouldn't feel too great, but I wasn't like incapacitated. But with this, I like literally, like, I had half of my mental faculties. I could only really I tried to read a book at one point, and I was like struggling to read this, and it wasn't like a super complicated thing I'm reading. And reading just a paragraph, I didn't even make it a whole page. It drained me to the point where I had to like stop and close my eyes and kind of take a little nap. So that symptom of extreme brain fog, combined with the weird achiness of my body, combined with the nausea, in addition to the fact I didn't have any other symptoms. I didn't have any runny nose. I didn't have phlegm, but I had this weird achiness, and it led me to believe that it just didn't feel right. It seemed like really off. Now, another thing is that a good friend of mine, one of my roommate, the same thing happened to him the night before. He went to bed, and then at around like 12:30, he just started feeling really nasty, and he had such intense back pain from the achiness that he couldn't sleep that night. So he, like, I'm sitting there on the couch, like trying to just like gather my thoughts. He comes downstairs and he's like, "Man, I didn't sleep last night. I've been like totally KO'd with the sickness." So in addition to all that, my fiance, she also had really intense sickness that day. Now, this is where it gets kind of, freaky and weird and, paranormal. There were her mother is abroad right now, and she and her new husband also came down with this sickness they were describing essentially the same symptoms. So there's in completely different parts of the world, there's these symptoms. Now, I'm not vaccinated. My fiance is not vaccinated. Her mother is not vaccinated. And my good friend is not vaccinated. So none of us are vaccinated against COVID. And I haven't had a vaccine since, I think, college. I had the mononucleosis vaccine, which is funny because I came down with mono later that year. Wonder what's up with that. Anyway, so it started to dawn on me that maybe I was dealing with some type of nefarious situation. I'm trying to be careful about what I say here because I don't want YouTube to strike me, although I kind of feel like it'll probably happen anyway. But so I'm going to try to be as candid as I can on the stream, but I'm going to please help me ask it by asking questions later, and I'll get to you with these questions. So yeah, I felt it indicated to me that this was a strange sickness. I didn't have any normal symptoms. Normally, when I'm feeling incredibly sick, like in 2020, when I got sick for like 3 weeks, I had really intense, like, discolored mucus. I was coughing phlegm up. I was blowing my nose like crazy. Those are indications in my mind that there's an actual infection happening. But when my body is reacting with an extreme fever and nausea and things like this and achiness, but I don't have a runny nose, I don't have any real symptoms other than the fever response, then it leads me to believe that there's something strange happening. Now, having researched this to a great extent several months ago, I know that there is a definitive case to be made for the fact that people who are getting the vaccine are shedding spike proteins, and that's making people sick. Now, let me just say as a disclaimer here, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a licensed medical professional, and to make sure I pay, what needs to be paid to Caesar here, I fully acknowledge the authority of the World Health Organization and CDC. Okay? So hopefully that'll give me some protection so I can talk about this with you guys, because I really like to share everything that I can. So that day I was totally KO'd. I don't normally like to take stuff. When I get sick, I don't not like the kind of person I'm like, load me up on Dayquil and everything and let's just numb myself out. I like to just let the process go forth. Part of the reason, as a sidebar on this discussion, is that is oftentimes your body, when you go into a fever response, it's a hormetic effect. So hormetic effects, or hormesis, is when you're exposed to some pathogen, some toxin, something like this, something that triggers your body's response. And for example, cruciferous vegetables, when you eat cruciferous vegetables, especially raw cruciferous vegetable, it releases a compound, I believe it's called sulfurylfluorine or something to that effect. And it's specifically as a defense that the cruciferous vegetable produces to prevent you from eating the food. And so part of the reason when you eat cabbage, sometimes you get that like kind of heat effect, is because there's a chemical that the cabbage releases to encourage you not to eat it. However, people's bodies have developed a counter response to this effect, that when that chemical is released in the body, your body releases another set of chemicals and responses that actually trigger a healing response. So that's what hormesis is. And a lot of times when we get sick, the reason you're experiencing a fever is because your body's like, hey, something's not right. I'm going to trigger an immunological response that is going to assist my body in all of the various ways that it's using to combat this illness. So, point here is that I prefer, and I think it's a good thing to do, to allow your body's natural processes to heal. Because when you go through a fever response, something like that, you've got what's it called? When your body apoptosis. So cells that are kind of old and funky, they go into programmed cell death. And new cells, new stem cells can come in to replace them. So often you can get like a really awesome cleansing effect from a decent round of fevering. And I suspect that a lot of times the reason people get these seasonal reactions is because their body's basically being like, hey, we're going to clean it. It's time for a spring cleaning, something like that. So for me, I tried to kind of go the natural route the first couple days. I didn't have a whole lot of nasty symptoms, and it was the third day on Wednesday. That's when I was like completely KO'd. And thankfully, I let the guys over at Rise TV know that, yeah, I'm basically unable to do anything. So I'm going to need like a little time to recuperate here. And thankfully, I got that, because as soon as Wednesday came, from Wednesday all the way up to like last Wednesday, so almost a week and a half, I could barely do anything. Like my cognitive function was severely depleted. I just couldn't think clearly, and I've never really had that happen before. So from what I've learned, there a lot of the issues that people are having from what we call COVID could be from spike proteins. It might not actually be, the virus. Now, I've heard, and people were telling me like, oh, you didn't get a virus, don't like feed into the programming. Like, well, yes, I get it. Like, I know that there's a case to be made that there potentially isn't a virus, and because they haven't isolated it. There's a guy in Canada, recently we posted this on Stillness, who he's in, I believe it's near the Alberta area. I forget the name of the province, but he didn't win a case, but the court acknowledged that they had not isolated COVID. And as a result of their failure to isolate COVID, the pretext for lockdowns and mass mandates of things like this had no validity. And the court basically went on with that. And supposedly, I haven't confirmed this, but I've heard this is true. Supposedly, the province had to lift their mask mandates and their lockdowns because of what this guy did. So I'm not just like coming out of left field with this whole like there might not really be a virus. It's a very good case to be made that what we're dealing with at the very least is not natural. Could be a bioweapon. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that it is, and finally the mainstream media is kind of acknowledging it, despite everything that's been happening. And so yeah, I concluded that there was probably something funky. So I thankfully very grateful to the people who helped me out. One of my colleagues and a fan of the show reached out and said, hey, listen, I can help you out and get you some hydroxychloroquine. And I started taking that. I started taking zinc, vitamin D3. Let's see what else. Guduchi, which is an herb that helps with immune responses. Let's see. And basically, like vitamin C, echinacea. I started taking some CBD. I've also heard that Delta 9 is a good Delta 9, which is a derivative. I'm sorry, no, Delta 8. Delta 8, which is a derivative of the cannabis plant, apparently also helps with this too. So I'm like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's get all this stuff in there. I started taking this. It was on Friday, and the HCQ is interesting. If you've never taken HCQ before, if you have to take it with food, because if you don't, then you can kind of get a little nauseous. So I was experiencing that for a few days, but basically within the day after I started taking the HCQ, I had another like resurgence of really intense symptoms. I was really out of it. 2 days later, I was basically at 50%. And then flash forward about 3 or 4 days, and I was kind of at like 70, 80%. And then basically I started to try to do some work again, was trying to do some script writing, and it was a struggle to focus, but I was starting to get my mojo back, so to speak. And here we are. Let's see. It's been about 2.5 weeks since this thing started, and I'm basically at 100%. Now, I can't say what I want to say here on the YouTube version, but in the private version, which we're going to start here in probably about a half hour or so, I'm going to talk to you about some other cool things about how to deal with this virus situation. So check that out. Please join. You can find the Subscribe Star link in the description of this. It's only $3 a month, and you can support this channel and gain access to the full stream. So now this is what's really interesting. So I started to feel better, and then this morning I went to go wake up, and I felt really lightheaded. And apparently, one of the effects of the HCQ is vertigo. I wasn't really feeling a whole lot of vertigo, but I took my dose at the end of the night. Now, what you're supposed to do is supposed to take it about every 12 hours. Well, if I haven't eaten enough food, I will not take what I should take because it can cause like really nasty nausea. So, but last night I happened to eat food properly. I was on a good schedule and I could take it. And I ended up taking it. So I'm thinking that possibly it's the HCQ, although I'm not entirely sure. But I woke up and I felt really lightheaded. I went to go, to like brush my teeth and stuff like that. And I started to get so lightheaded that I was like stumbling around, and apparently like I collapsed. So that was really strange. I've never had that happen before. I'm thinking it's probably just like I said, a symptom of vertigo. I haven't really had a whole lot of lightheadedness since then, but as you can imagine, it really freaked my fiance out. So we were looking into some things, and I'm pretty sure it was just a side effect. So thankfully, I've been keeping an eye on myself and making sure I get plenty of oxygen, but I don't have really any issues to speak of since then. So that's good. So yeah, so that's the whole story. I am going to talk a little bit more about it in the private chat. It looks like, let me see, I'm just going to peruse the chat to see if there's any questions. Yeah, it looks like somebody who also has kind of was in a similar situation had a very similar response that they got a little nauseous. Let's see. Q-Seritin. Okay, I haven't heard about that before. Colloidal silver. Yeah, I've heard of colloidal silver. I've taken it before. I didn't have any available to me, although in hindsight, I probably could have taken that. Probably would have helped a lot. As far as I understand, the way this thing seems to be working is there's indications that, it's not natural. And it has more of like an effect, almost like an allergy. Like when I used to get pollen allergy reactions when I was a kid. It kind of feels like that. So it makes me wonder if the spike protein and I believe the graphene that they use to contain the biological material allegedly that is in these vaccines can self-replicate and can trigger all sorts of, you know, issues like this. That's probably what's going on. Let's see. Okay, so that's the whole COVID story. I'm alive and well. I'm not dead yet. Haven't killed me yet, so that's good. And I'll go ahead and let's see. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. If you got a question, just type question in all caps and then type your question. That way I can see it because there's a lot of activity. I was able to eat. So what I did is there's a soup that's in the Gerson therapy called Hippocrates soup. And it's onions, garlic, carrots, celery. You can put cabbage in there or broccoli. I think you can put basil, and that's about it. You're not supposed to put salt because part of the Gerson therapy to treat cancers is to restore your body's proper intracellular and intercellular salts. So what tends to happen in the modern age is we got sodium chloride, which is just one of 12 salts that is just like pumped into everything we eat. And so what happens is salt levels build up. You get a rain barrel effect, which is not my term. This is a term that was coined by somebody else, but it's a really good way to think about this. And your salt levels increase so much that they start to invade the interior of the cell. And now that potassium sodium balance that is really important for proper cell function and protein synthesis and all sorts of things is now out of whack. And now you start to get all sorts of issues. Once that triggers, then you get all sorts of health problems. So the Hippocrates soup worked really good, and that's what I was eating. I was also I don't eat meat, so I eat a lot of nuts and chia seeds and fruit and things like that. It's kind of like my staple. I eat a lot of that kind of stuff. And I was able to eat that. I didn't really have many issues, although I didn't have a whole lot of appetite either. And I ended up losing probably like 10 pounds, somewhere around there. Not so much in body weight, although I did have a little, subcutaneous fat. It was mainly because I wasn't working out, so my muscles started to fade away. So yeah. I did not have a vaccine. So some people are asking, have you gotten a vaccine? I did not get a vaccine. I have not had a vaccine since I was like 19, and I don't plan on getting one anytime soon. So what I suspect happened is that whether it's a spike protein that got replicated or I don't know really, people think there's this Delta variant and there's variants floating around. If we are dealing with some type of cabal bioweapon, which it seems to be, that's a pretty good compelling case, then what they're probably doing is they're spraying us like crazy with everything they can imagine to keep this thing going, because their whole agenda, the Great Reset and everything that's coming, the Green New Deal, is all centered around getting people into this new technocratic society. As a matter of fact, I have a video I'm going to show you guys here in a little bit about that. And as a matter of fact, you know what? I could probably go ahead and transition. Question, which vaccine did you have? Yeah, both of them. Yeah, like I said, I didn't have any of the vaccine. I have not had any of the COVID vaccines at all. No COVID vaccines whatsoever. Now I'm around people, like people in my church have had the COVID vaccine, and I did, right when the vaccine was really coming out and people were just like gung-ho with it, I did have like a 24-hour like feeling kind of funky. But it went away pretty quickly. So exactly. I was not tested, responding to Beginning Hope. I did not get the test because I did not want my name in a database somewhere saying that I have contracted COVID, but I didn't get a vaccine, because I'm assuming, and this is just my personal conjecture, that if they really try to push these ridiculous COVID mandates, this COVID vaccine mandates, so they're going to come after, low-hanging fruit first, the people who contracted COVID but didn't get the vaccine for whatever reason. So yeah. So okay, so I've jabbered on about this. If you got more questions, go ahead and Pop them in the chat if you're in Zoom. You can go ahead and pop some into the chat in YouTube. If you got a question, just go ahead and put question in caps so I can make sure I see it. Which one just came through? Do you have a pulse oximeter to check your O2 saturation? No, that's a great idea. I would love to get some instrumentation. Just as a sidebar on all this, I'm a big into health, and I've seen every kind of health, buzz that you can imagine, although not obviously, but I'm familiar with the fact that there are health, what do they call them? Buzzes, like, trends, things that people like, oh, they're into Atkins, they're into, all MCT oil, you're into all these various different trending kind of like health regimens. And part of the problem with these is that it's difficult to know if they're having any effect because we often don't get good diagnostic testing on our vital levels. So I want to get a lot of instrumentation so I can basically become my own kind of like health diagnostic, because I tend to not trust the medical system all that much. And I've got plenty of experiences in my life to say that's probably a good idea, but I'll leave it at that for now. So let's go ahead and get into some other stuff. If you're just joining the stream, I'm going to make the stream private probably in about a half hour, and we're going to get to talk about some really cool stuff. I got a lot to say that I can't say now. So we'll go forward with that. So let me pull up my notes here. And I got a bunch of cool stuff to show y'all. Let's see. All right. So let's do, where is the World Economic Forum? So I was just talking about that. Okay, so this is something that Rob actually sent me from Rise TV. So we're going to watch this. It's like a 2-minute video, and then we will discuss what it means. All right, let's see. Let's share the screen. Not that. There we go. Okay, so here we are. Let me unplug myself so you can hear. And we're going to start the video. Offices will be reimagined. That sounds crazy. A client showroom, interesting. A research lab. This is what our offices are going to be. You can reconnect with colleagues. Boy, that sounds so awesome. 15-minute workspaces, neighborhood hubs could replace some of the perks we miss by not commuting to an office. They might contain gyms, bars, or art galleries, or offer networking opportunities. And you would be no more than 15-minute walk from your home. Boy, doesn't this sound amazing. The rise of cloud markets. Ghost kitchens, restaurants that solely deliver takeaway meals, exploded in popularity during lockdowns. These could morph into cloud markets. Analytics-driven services that license and deliver food to your home from a range of brands. Facial recognition systems that are often stumped by face match. This part's creepy, but your heartbeat is just as unique as your face. And NASA has invented a system that can ID you from your heartbeat using a laser. Yikes. Digital technology will change the way we do everything. While homeschooling was challenging for many families, it also has benefits for those who access digital. With access, children could learn at their own pace while improving their digital skills. Education in the future could become a hybrid of school and home-based learning, combining the best of both worlds. What pandemic-era changes would you like to become permanent? None, thank you. Okay, so there you have it. Really disturbing. I don't know what's more disturbing, the fancy music or the fact that they're just trying to sell us on this post-COVID world like we should be all excited that the world's gone through this incredible radical shift, and we should be happy that our kids can't go to school anymore. There's just so much to say here. A couple points, just as a playing devil's advocate, I'm not necessarily saying that there's only horrible things can happen as a result of all the stuff we've been dealing with. Obviously not, because there's millions of people who've become way more aware of the machinations of the powers that be because of this COVID situation. One of those things is making people aware of the fact that the World Economic Forum, as one of the various spheres of the kind of Agenda 2030 New World Order agenda, they are trying to shift and use this crisis as a way to change and reimagine the economy. So what do they want to do? Well, they want to create a digital kind of workspace environment. Now, I think homeschooling is something that's beneficial, but there's a lot of challenges that we need to face if we want to have homeschooling become the predominant way that people educate their children. Part of the reason that this is a problem is that if you are being homeschooled, you have to be there for your children, or somebody has to be there. And so the question is if you're not going to do it, who's going to do it? And then secondly are you qualified to do it? And thirdly, if you're not, and let's face it, I have aspirations to do this stuff, but I want to make sure I know what I'm doing. And a lot of people don't necessarily have the training to successfully create a homeschooling environment. And that's, I'm not knocking anybody. We just have to think about this like practically here. And honestly, if you're going to, for a lot of parents, school is a babysitter, and it's because they're both working jobs. Some of them are working 2 jobs. So taking a child and thrusting them into a home situation where the parents are already super stressed because of the COVID situation, because they have to work these 2 jobs, is not necessarily going to translate into something good. That being said, the good news is that people are essentially starting to reconsider the importance of reclaiming dominion or reclaiming ownership of how we educate our children. Flash before this whole public school thing, which is a pretty new idea with respect to human history, the way our children were taught was mentorship. You had a journeyman master kind of a situation. You, through your church or through the town, you had some type of a teacher, some type of a communal education type of a situation. And then you would, depending on what your chosen profession is, obviously for men, it was more of the case because men were more out into the market to go get vocational jobs, whereas women would often stay home and learn domestic duties. So I'm talking about Prussian education that started to emerge in the 1800s, 1850s, somewhere around there. So before that, that's how education was. You had to choose as a man or as a young boy, what were you going to do? You're going to be a blacksmith, you're going to raise cattle, you're going to do what your father did. Well, if you are, now you're going to go from rudimentary education, and then you're going to go into a training environment. So that has some benefits, because the bottom line is people learn better when they're in a more holistic educational environment. This whole idea that you can put a kid in a chair for 8 hours, and have them barely get any physical exercise, and then teach them a bunch of things, decontextualize it so they don't actually have any real world association with the facts that they're learning, and have it actually translate into a meaningful preparation for life is ludicrous. And I think even the most staunch proponents of our public education system will acknowledge, maybe hesitantly, that our education does not do a good job of preparing people for life. So I think there's major issues there. The biggest issue I see behind this is this whole let's sell people on the idea that lockdowns are great is yet another weapon to destroy valid human community connection. Human beings were not meant to live alone. We were meant to have good, integrated communities. I call them externalized community. What I mean by externalized is that all of the internal activity of your mind, the things you think about, your opinions, your worries, your concerns, your dreams for life, your aspirations, all of that internal information needs to be shared in the external world. And a community is, if you can live in a community where you can be honest about your internal passions and musings and things of this sort, then you often get a very intelligent person as a result of that. They have good emotional regulation skills. They have increased, intelligence, ability to analyze information, and higher IQs. And they have their ability to, weather life challenges is way increased. The highest IQ populations on the planet right now are Ashkenazi Jews and Asians. So, what is the looking at their communities? Well, in an Ashkenazi Jewish community, like a what's the word? Traditional kind of Orthodox Jew type of situation, you've got a very close-knit community. What's at the center of the community? Well, the fundamental beliefs about God and your place as a child of God. And they have this whole system of things you should and should not do. And if you follow the things you should do, then basically the whole of the community rallies to support you as a member of the community. Now, is it perfect? No, I'll be the first one to say these things, it's not perfect, but compared to your average person in the West, like, I don't live in a fully functioning, like, integrated community where my family, my nuclear family that I always grew up with is close to me. I don't necessarily associate with my cousins all that much, not because we have issues necessarily, but because this is true for a lot of people. The extended family community has been dispersed all throughout the country. Most people don't live near their relatives. That creates a lot of challenges. It creates a lot of challenges in the sense that if you're trying to raise children, you're doing it in isolation. It can often happen where the mom is at home with the child all day long. She doesn't really interact with a whole lot of people because grandma and auntie and everybody else are all over the country. So it puts a lot of strain on the child and the mother. And so it has a lot of issues. So right now we're living in a situation where 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, most people knew their neighbors and would interact with their neighbors and their community in some capacity. Ever since, I'm not exactly sure when this transition happened, but it definitively has been increasing over the past 20 years. Now we have a situation where, because of, these cell phones and all this fancy stuff that we can do on here, why the hell would I want to talk to my neighbor? Why would I want to get to know my community? Why would I want to do anything for my community when I can just tune them out and, pop up on Netflix or Snapchat or TikTok or whatever it is. And before you know it, the only people I interact with are not the people around me. They're the people in the digital world. And what does that do? It creates a reliance on these digital services. It's an artificial form of social interaction, and it causes dysregulation of the individual psychology in a host of different ways by virtue of the fact that the people that you live around, you're not physically building rapport with. So your brain, the mid part of your brain, which I've mentioned before, is specifically designed to regulate your social health and status with the people you see. If you see people in your world that you haven't brokered trust with, at least at a rudimentary level, then your brain's like, oh, I got to be a little more stressed because I don't know if I can trust the people around me. So I'll end the rant there because I could just talk forever about this topic. It's something I'm really passionate about. I suspect that this whole World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, let's reimagine society, this technocratic slave plantation that they want everybody on, is not for our best interest. And we should be very careful about these things. And, I've been trying to figure out a way to create community for my family and my life for several years now. It's part of the reason I went to Morocco in 2014, is because even then, although I didn't have a fully as good of an understanding as I do now about the importance of community, I realized that community was really important. So I want to really make as a passion of my life, trying to rediscover how to have valid community. And that's why I love doing these streams and talking to all of you, because this is part of it. We have to talk to each other and share ideas and form camaraderie around truths and values. And then from that, we can actually create real, practically useful communities where we can protect each other's rights, where we can protect each other's interests. We can protect each other from the bad guys. Well, the bad guys as in Big Brother is what I'm trying to point at there, not God, obviously. So yeah. All right. Let's move on to some other things. So I'm going to kind of go rapid fire with some news stories because there's so much to cover. Let's see. All right, so there is this infrastructure bill that's been happening. I wanted to read some of this from the Representative Chip Roy I don't know exactly where he's a representative from, but he's from the 21st district in Texas, and he had went through the bill, the infrastructure bill, and he pulled some really disturbing points that I want to show and talk to you guys about for a little bit. So let me see here. All right. Oh, I want to share that. Boom. Okay. Okay, let's do that. Please. Oh, wow. It won't let me share the screen. Okay, let's try this. Huh. Okay, well, I'm going to try one more time. Maybe the Zoom gods are fighting me. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, so there we go. You can see my smiling face right here. So he went through, I'm going to post, this is going to be in the description, so you'll be able to see. I'll also post it in the chat for everybody here. This is in Zoom, and I'll also have it in the show links. So 19 Republican senators just voted for a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package that's filled with leftist garbage. There's been a lot of smoke and mirror effects to hide, or efforts to hide what's in the bill. So let's take a look at what they're actually voting for. First, the bill isn't focused on hard infrastructure and instead provides billions to Green New Deal programs. For example, it funnels $16.2 billion to renewable and energy efficient projects and $7.5 billion to electric vehicle chargers. So that's a little troubling. I mean, it sounds good on the surface, like who doesn't want to protect the environment? Who doesn't want to safeguard the environment? But what are they actually going to do with the money? Mind you, this is when you think about infrastructure bills. I mean, I'm sure everybody's pretty aware of pork barrel and all that. But remember that in the 80s, the New York Times published an article that revealed we were spending $150, I think, on toilet seats for some, features of the military and things like this. So these people know how to bilk the American people. The cabal know how to bilk the American people for money. And part of the reason that the way they do it is getting everybody all hopped up on good intention buzz, like protecting the environment. Turns out it probably won't go to do a whole lot for the environment. Next, we got, even when it funds hard infrastructure, it also wastes your money on programs that have no business being in the infrastructure bill. Of the $65 billion for broadband, so the internet, over $14 billion goes to permanent federal welfare program to pay individuals' internet bills. This is not good news, everybody. Like, I'm all for charity, but charity is not just giving people money willy-nilly. True charity is identifying the fact that there's some problem that needs to be fixed, okay? So the fact that, for example, somebody can lose their job, and then before you know it, they've lost all their money and they have to live on the street. That's a problem with society, that we have a problem dealing with society, but there might also be a problem for the individual. And you have to address these issues. True charity is about giving somebody the resources and the support they need to overcome the challenge. It's not just a blank check forever and on to do whatever the hell they want with, at basically becoming parasites on society. This is what the cabal wants you to believe, that charity is just handing people money because they put their hand out. That's not going to do much for people. If you want to get a good example of the destructive effects of handing people money when they don't know what to do with it, look, if you hand a homeless person who's got a drug problem a bunch of money, they're not necessarily going to put that money away and try to improve their lives. What they're probably going to do, because of the conditions, the incredible destructive effects of social isolation as a result of being homeless, they're going to try to alleviate their pain and suffering by escaping reality through alcohol or drugs. And history shows you take, for example, you take a crackhead, a cocaine addict, you give them a bunch of money, they're not going to go if you give them 20 grand, oh, they're going to get their life together because they got all this money and they're going to go get a car and, get a house and clean up some stuff and apply for a job. Maybe, but it probably is not going to work that way. You can't just hand a person a bunch of money. What you need to do is be like, hey, here's this money, here's this charity. I'm going to counsel you, I'm going to minister to you to try to improve the situation that caused this. So you're going to do it for the individual, and then you're going to look at society and be like, oh, why is it that this is happening? What conditions in society have contributed to the hardship that emerged as a result of whatever this person went through? And you want to have that like macrocosmic and microcosmic look. So there's my rant about charity. Let's see what else we got in this bill. Americans should also know that the money for roads and bridges will also pay for things like a $10 million program to benefit pollinators and roadsides. Pollinators, am I saying that right? Yeah, pollinators on roadsides. Or $250 million program to remove invasive plants. So yeah, it's debatable. Now, admittedly, I have to be honest with you here. I don't know enough about the role of government and infrastructure to say what should or should not be, like definitively 100%. So I'm just like you, I'm looking at this kind of through the eyes of a layman. That being said, though, is it really important? And if we're talking about creating jobs allegedly by doing these things, are we really creating jobs? Are we really going to be improving our infrastructure in the United States? I don't know, maybe. Let's keep looking. So contrary to what some Republicans say, the bill is not paid for. Supporters gripped when CBO determined it would add $256 billion to the deficit. The top pay for $210 billion in unused COVID relief is just repurposed deficit spending that will make record inflation worse. So what does that mean? Well, I'm sure a lot of you already know, but I'll just give you a brief recap. The budget for the United States, and this is true for a lot of places, so whether it's the federal budget, whether it's state budgets, whether it's county budgets, municipalities like your town or your city, they often run on loans. So if they need whatever 100 million to manage the city, then 80 million of that is going to be a loan that comes from somewhere, and then they're servicing the debt. So that's what we have in the United States. The service of the debt to the United States is done through the Federal Reserve. The last time I looked, it's on the order of like $400 billion. So when they're doing line items for these things, when things are operating at a deficit, what that means is that the money's got to come from somewhere. It comes from the creditor that the United States uses. The United States, for the most part, draws from the credit of the central bank, the Federal Reserve, which of course is not truly federal. It's owned by private bankers, and also sovereign debt and trade deficits and things like this. So, effectively, in short, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're robbing from the future. My kids, which don't exist yet, but when they come, they are going to have to pay for this. Your kids are going to have to pay for this. We are going to have to pay for this. So we should be very careful about what kind of money is being thrown around. Further analysis from UPenn's Wharton School found the bill added $351 billion to the deficit and wouldn't significantly help economic growth through 2050. So if we enact this thing, it's 2021 now, 29 years, we aren't really going to see an appreciable benefit. That's not good. So what does that mean? It means we're just throwing money into the wind. And you know what's happening when we throw money into the wind? People who are professional grifters, we might say, in the political arena, they are receiving the benefit. They might be the beneficiary of a conglomerate like Dick Cheney was with, what is that? When Dick Cheney was in office, this was back when Bush was in office in the 2000 to 2008, the Carlyle Group. He was a beneficiary of a Carlyle Group. He was involved in a massive military contractor, private contractor type of a business. What happens? The war on terror happens, and what happens? Oh boy, all of a sudden we need massive amounts of money to be dumped into military programs because we have to go and police the world now. And who got to benefit? Somebody like Dick Cheney and the people the shareholders that own shares in the Carlyle Group. So that's what the kind of stuff that happens here. You get money that is funded through various mechanisms and programs that is spent on various pork barrel projects, things of this sort, that effectively leech the American people through taxes, and then that takes that money and funnels it into the hands of, you know, what we might think of as parasitic business entities. So there's lots of problems with this. Let's look at a little bit more here. Third, contrary to some Republicans' claims, it is full of woke language and critical race theory. Check out this line on the Disadvantaged Businesses Enters program, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, which could have been written by CRT huckster Ibram X. Kennedy himself. All right, so it says, let me make sure I'm reading this thing properly. Scientific reports issued by public and private agencies, news stories, reports of discrimination by organizations and individuals, and dissemination, yeah, sorry about that, by organization individuals and discrimination lawsuits, which show that race and gender neutral efforts alone are insufficient to address the problem. If racial discrimination is defined as treating, considering, or making distinction in favor of or against an individual based on that person's race, then racial discrimination is not inherently racist. The defining question is whether the discrimination is creating equity or inequality, or equality or inequality. If discrimination is creating equality, then it is anti-racist. Wow. I mean, I don't know if you saw or heard the linguistic hula hoops that they just went through there. But basically what they're suggesting is that if an effort by the government lowers or increases equality as they've defined it, mind you, you have to ask yourself, how is equality defined? Then even if it seems racist or if it goes against one group or another, it's not racist because it's helping to bring about equality. That's like ends justify the means, straight up black magic. You know, I've been talking about magic a lot in my show, so there's a lot of, I tend to look at these things through that lens right now. This is black word magic, basically. What are the ways that the forces of darkness maintain their stranglehold on the people is they dilute our ability to properly understand the meaning of words. Legalese is itself a form of black word magic for all intents and purposes, because they occult or they hide the true meaning of the words behind a veil. And so we are just like, well, I don't know. I'm not reading this however long. It's probably thousands of pages, this infrastructure bill. And so all you get is these little sound bites from people in the media, and it's like, who isn't for equality? Of course I'm for equality. What you don't realize is that equality actually means, like, you know, pushing these anti-white CRT initiatives so that we can steal from the wealth and rape, have recompense and what's the word? When you take wealth from one population and give it to another because of some historic wrong. That's what they're trying to do with some of this stuff. So I'm going to stop it there. There's, as you can imagine, a lot of craziness that's going along in this infrastructure bill. And this is why we need, as a people, we need to work together. Like, imagine a situation, I'm going to kind of use community as like a theme for this stream because I'm really passionate about it. Imagine if you had a situation where there were people around you where once a week or once a month or whatever you could manage, you got together to talk to each other about the things that are happening in the world so you can increase your awareness and understanding of these things, so that when a bill or a proposed amendment came down or something like this, we could know what we're really dealing with here, because we can't trust the media. They manipulate us all the time. All right, so let's see. What else we got? We have... So Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to put forth some impeachment articles for our buddy Biden. Let's see what she's got to say there. So this is from Conservative Brief. Marjorie Taylor Greene says she's filing articles of impeachment against Joe Biden. This is just from 2 days ago. This is pre-President Biden, not this dude, but this dude. I'll let you figure out what I mean by that. The Republican Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said she is drafting articles of impeachment against Joe Biden as the debacle of his Afghanistan withdrawal of troops continues. She spoke to Donald Trump's former advisor, Steve Bannon, on his War Room podcast this weekend when she made the announcement. MSN reported, quote, I'm assuming this is her, I have my team right now working on articles of impeachment, she said. Because I'm so disgusted with Joe Biden, you know I've already filed one set of articles of impeachment, because she did that earlier this year. But his failure as president is unspeakable. Now, what's going to happen? Are they going to make any progress with this? Is he going to get impeached tomorrow? It's not necessarily clear. There's nothing really clear about what the basis of the impeachment is. But what it will do, and this is something I want to speak to a little bit, is that it will help more American people realize the kind of situation we're dealing with here, which is that we're in an unprecedented situation. I'm trying to be careful what I say because I don't want YouTube to yank this here, but the guy in the big White House is not who we think he is, and there is a good reason to believe that we are in a coup situation. I'm going to leave it at that. Let me pull up another article that's related to this. This one's really cool, actually. It gave me a lot of hope when I saw this. Let's see. Okay. No, that's President Biden. Or is it? 1 second, apologies. Okay, so there was, well, I'm trying to find it here. There was suggestions that when Biden was at Camp David while this whole Afghanistan thing was happening, that he was not necessarily in Camp David. I thought I pulled that article, but I guess I didn't. Okay. Well, here, let me see if I can find it real quick. Biden. Okay. Well, let's see. All right. So we'll have to pull from PolitiFact just to get the raw facts, but this will give you an overview of basically what's happening. So let me share the screen here real quick for y'all. Oh, come on. There we go. So unwind, obviously it's PolitiFact, so I'm not necessarily saying these guys know what the hell they're talking about, but we're just going to use them to get some pieces of this story. In a photo released by the White House, President Joe Biden meets virtually with his national security team on Afghanistan on Sunday, August 15th at Camp David. The photo touched off unfounded conspiracy theories online. Well, what are those conspiracy theories? A photo of the White House shared, let's see, according to the clocks, the time difference between London and Moscow was 3 hours, but due to daylight savings, it's only 2 right now. Claims that this is evidence that the photo is old or doctored or unfounded. So there's the basic gist. So basically, these clocks right here have times that some people believe suggest the photo might be doctored. I'm not even going to bother reading the rest of this, but that's the idea now. Now, the reason I thought this was interesting is because apparently, normies or people who aren't necessarily people who tend to buy the mainstream media narrative, we'll put it that way, despite the fact that they might be, not necessarily just buying into all of the stuff that's pushed by the mainstream media. So that's what I mean by normie. They were the ones who were pointing out this whole COVID clock thing, and that maybe Biden might not be where we think he is, or that potentially the photo was taken before, the situation even emerged. Now, there is a compelling case to be made for the fact that a lot of times events are pre-planned and the things that we see might be doctored. Like there was a decent amount of chatter back when the January 6th thing was going down that the video that we saw of Trump asking the protesters to basically go home, and related videos, I think there was one afterwards where he talked, yeah, there was several that he put out, might have been pre-recorded. And so, there's a theater element to this. Now, just because it's pre-recorded doesn't mean that it's nefarious, but we're in a middle of a Cold War situation. Basically, we're in a a a battle between the forces of goodness and the forces of darkness, to put it simply. Again, I'm trying to be careful of what I can say on YouTube. So what that means is that there's a lot of theater and posturing, and this has to happen on the part of the good guys as much as it does on the part of the bad guys. So just because there's some manipulation happening of events does not necessarily mean it's for nefarious purposes. So that was really interesting. Why is that hopeful? Well, it's because normies are pointing out the fact that Biden's a liar, and he's probably not doing what we think he's doing. So it's the ineffectualness of Biden and his ineptitude, and the fact that he's a puppet has become so well known in the collective consciousness that now normies are pointing these things out. That is very good news, my friends. Very good news. That's going to become important as time goes on. Let's go through another one here. So I'm going to go rapid fire through some of these. Special Forces doctor. Joe Biden must resign. Afghanistan and his COVID response make it crystal clear. This is something that came out on the Federalist Papers. It discusses this advisor who's basically saying that he's incompetent and there's a very good reason to suggest that he should resign. And yeah, I think that's probably the case. Now, I haven't had the chance to familiarize myself with all the ins and outs of the Afghan situation, but I think it's pretty clear that this was a major issue. Somebody wanted to discuss, like, what does this mean? So I'm going to take some time to do that right now. So what is the potential implications? Like, is this thing that happened in Afghanistan something that is good? Is it like an indication that maybe the good guys are winning? Is it an indication that the bad guys are trying to distract us? Well, first of all, I don't know for sure. I don't think anybody knows necessarily for sure, completely with 100% proof. So we have to entertain multiple possibilities. So this is a good exercise for critical thinking and strategic thinking, which is very, very useful, as you can imagine, in our world of deception. So one benefit I can see to the situation is that, let's imagine that the military is not totally loyal to Biden. Let's also imagine that the military has been going along with the Biden administration, but keep in mind that the Pentagon did not want to meet with Biden after he supposedly won the election. And there is several other indications to suggest that there's some, issues with the military just like completely giving themselves over to Biden as the commander-in-chief. So again, I have to be careful about what I say there, but there's a very good case to be made from a military law perspective, and this is something we're going to talk about on the private stream with the whole devolution theory, that what we're seeing right now is a kind of going along with the Biden administration so that the people can be made slowly aware of the depth of what's been going on behind the scenes for decades. Namely, that the cabal has effectively taken over and gotten its tentacles all the way into various facets of the government and, our culture. And we need to, if we really want to solve the problem, we need to get people aware and see what's happening so that we can really have a lasting solution. So what's the benefit? Well, the benefit, if this was a situation wherein the military kind of allowed things to destabilize, if the military did allow things to destabilize, the benefit would be it makes Biden look bad. They're already calling this, Biden Saigon, which is a shot back to what happened in the Vietnam War after we lost and people had to get the hell out of there. So it's a serious tragedy. Like, there were people who were trying to leave the country by clinging onto a massive military plane. This is what I saw anyway. I'm pretty sure this is the case. And they were hanging on to the landing gear and falling from the sky. So this is serious. This isn't just like oh, well, we left and, they're just going to go back to life the way it was. So we've been in war in Afghanistan since 2003, if memory serves. And this is one of the longest standing occupation efforts for the United States. And then we just give up 20 years in and like, whoops, we dropped the ball there. I mean, it just makes Biden look really bad. And it makes the military look bad. But because Biden is the commander in chief, and I forget his name, but one of Biden's military advisors, I think he works with the Pentagon or potentially the Department of Justice. He I think his name's Spicer or Spencer. He is also going to take some heat for this. Now, from what I heard, that when I looked at the news the other day, Paskey took a week off. Apparently, she's not going to do anything like go to the podium as press secretary and answer any questions. So all of this is not so good for Biden. Now, is it possible that this is some kind of distraction where, the bad guys have manufactured something and they want to let the Taliban back in? Yeah, absolutely. The Taliban is itself an organization that was basically created by the CIA, as far as I was able to tell when I was doing my research several years ago. And, we use rebels and proxy agents to do our dirty work. We've been doing this for a long time. And, it's entirely possible that the cabal wanted to let the Taliban come back in, maybe because, they're going to do some kind of money laundering thing. Like there's a ton of heroin and opium production that happens in Afghanistan. Who are the people that make money off of opium? Well, it's drug manufacturers. Where does fentanyl come from? I don't know if fentanyl comes from opium, but we do know that fentanyl is produced by the Chinese, and they've been making boatloads of money getting people hooked on fentanyl over here. So again, we've got a Cold War situation here, and all of this potentially could be affecting the geopolitical situation. But I don't have clear 100% proof answers. I would say that use this as an exercise to review what the interpretations might be, and you're going to strengthen your ability to navigate the crazy geopolitical field out there. Let's get into another one. Twitter uses knows. Oh, here it is. Here's the one that I was trying to point out. Let me read a little bit. This is a pretty short one. It's the article about Biden, the clock. Okay. So article, Twitter users notice strange detail in photo of Biden at Camp David. Is this a pic from before March 23rd? On Sunday, after a week of successful seizures of dozens of provincial capitals across the country as U.S. forces began evacuating personnel from Kabul, Taliban militants marched into Kabul, which is the capital of Afghanistan, installed themselves as in the presidential palace as Afghan President Ashraf Ghani fled the nation and declared the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan had been established. On Monday morning, President Joe Biden was facing a slew of criticism for his administration's handling of the disaster. Biden isn't facing anything, or at least he certainly hadn't been on Sunday. While he's set to address the nation on Monday afternoon, his absence from the public eye has been very, very conspicuous as Kabul falls to terrorists, and Americans and Afghans alike plead to be evacuated from the new Islamic State. So, okay, here we go. The president has been safely tucked away at Camp David this whole time, avoiding the media as even his press secretary enjoys a week of vacation. What's more, the flimsy attempts by the White House made over the weekend at convincing Americans that President Biden was totally working and also completely competent involved posting photos of him on Saturday and Sunday meeting with top officials to discuss the situation in Afghanistan on a video call while sitting alone in a conference room at the presidential retreat. This is the Saturday post. So here we see he's looking presidential. And here's the photo of Biden. Okay, so this is the one he's talking to Kamala and whoever these other people are. And looks like there's somebody from the Pentagon right there. So, and this is his Sunday photo. So this is the one from Sunday. Slowly loading. Hold on 1 second. Come on. There we go. Okay, so we see London, we see Moscow, we see, so these are the clocks that people are talking about. Okay, so let's figure out what's going on here. Neither exactly gets Americans' hearts pounding with confident pride. There's more of a problem, however. Even as Biden was slammed for his solo long distance executive leadership from Camp David, sharp eyed netizens, basically people on the internet, noticed a small detail in the photos released by the White House and raised a question about whether they were even taken last week. As conservative commentator Kyle Becker noted on Twitter and on his website, there was a conspicuous anomaly on the clocks above the screen on which President Biden could see Vice President Kamala Harris and some other top officials. There was a 3-hour difference between London and Moscow, which because England observes daylight savings time but Moscow does not, should not be the case in August. Either Camp David, quote, either Camp David's clocks are wrong or the photos are from March 28th. Our photos are from before March 28th, when London went ahead on daylight savings time, but Moscow did not. Becker noted on Twitter. This is fine, he added sarcastically. This is him talking about this. The Twitter account Aldous Huxley's Ghost noticed the conspicuous error as well. Hi, at White House, can you please explain why the clocks above the television show standard time rather than daylight savings time? Moscow will not be 3 hours different than London until November 7th, 2021. This isn't pre-March picture. That's photoshopped, is it? The dystopian author Spectre's the dystopian author Spectre mused, tagging the White House's Twitter account. So there you have it. Now, there's, as you can see from the political fact post that we saw here earlier, these guys did damage control immediately and started basically, saying that this is just a wild conspiracy theory. It's crazy. Both images show detailed clocks meant to reflect the time either of the cities. In the first, it looks like there was 11:03, Washington, D.C. So, they're trying to explain this stuff away. So I would say that the fact that, the normies are noticing this, the people that aren't necessarily into the conspiratorial component of what the hell's going on in our world, they are pointing this out, and that is good news. It means people are way more hip to questioning the official dictates of the arbiters of truth and our over-controllers in government. So that is good news. So let's move on to another one. Chinese regime takes financial stake in TikTok, now directly linked to Facebook fact checkers lead stories. So this just shows you something that is a disturbing trend in the modern world. We got these arbiters of truth coming in telling us, what is real, what isn't real, what to believe, what not to believe. And it's just total affront to, the respect of our mind space with respect to being able to navigate our own realities. Now, TikTok, if you aren't familiar, was in heated issues because it was discovered, and unfortunately I'm a little hazy on the details, but it was effectively discovered that TikTok was being used by Chinese to spy on Americans, and your phone effectively became a microphone where you would send data to, China, and they would do all sorts of stuff with it. It's spying. What would they do? Well, they'd steal intellectual property. If you aren't familiar, and this is something that Trump, part of the contingency plans that Trump put forth in 2020, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, and I'm going to probably go to the private side of the chat here in about 5-10 minutes. So I'm going to wrap the story up, and then we'll go over there. TikTok was, or I'm sorry, the cybersecurity agency that Trump enacted, part of the reason he did it is because it was discovered that China, through TikTok, was spying on Americans and stealing intellectual property. And the theft of intellectual property by China is massive, 300 billion a year. And I've heard some estimates at 700 billion in intellectual property gets stolen by the Chinese every year. That's huge, especially in our digital world where intellectual property is such an integral part of our society. We can debate the deeper merits of having intellectual property and things like this in another time. But for now, for all intents and purposes, if we have to acknowledge that property rights exist and are important, or we could potentially create a situation where we're in like the socialist hell, and that's what the controllers want, of course. So I thought it was kind of interesting. Keep your eye out for that. Now TikTok is associated with these fact checkers. We had an awesome video. Ryan, my managing editor and a writer, good friend of mine, we worked on this together. It was a video exposing the fact checkers. If you go to stillnessinthestorm.com, it's on the sidebar. You can check it out. It's also on Rumble. As you'd imagine, I couldn't put it on YouTube. So let's talk about a couple others. It was confirmed, or Trump hinted, that he's gearing up for a 2024 run. That's pretty good news. And in another article, Civil War head, Afghan ex-VP declares himself in charge, forms an anti-Taliban resistance. So that's interesting. So now we have a potential war-torn situation that could emerge in Afghanistan. So the Taliban has claimed they've taken possession of the capital. So they are the de facto rulers. De facto partially because people have capitulated. They're not, there's not an entrenched resistance within the government to be like, hey, you're not the leaders. We didn't vote you in. There's no, true legal process to get you in. Therefore, you're basically dictators. Well, the VP is saying he's in charge. So where are his loyalties lying? I'm sure we'll find some interesting things come out from that. In another article from General Flynn, he says, since new DHS alert, you are a potential terrorist if you oppose White House lies. Yes, that's pretty disturbing. Let me read a little bit of this one, because this is one that we're going to need to contend with. This is one of these moments where it's disturbing that this is happening, but it's also good that it's happening, because this is something these people have been doing anyway. Ever since the War Powers Treaty and the God, it's been so long since I remembered the legal acts, but basically all of the American people have been declared enemies of the state as early, or as going back all the way to the beginning of the 20th century. I actually think it started sometime after the Civil War. So the Civil War, we have the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment legalized slavery. It says that nobody shall be enslaved unless they've been duly convicted under law. So if they're a convicted criminal, guess what? You're a slave now. That's literally what the 13th Amendment says. So you use that, you combine that with presumptions of potential threats as a result of the War Powers Act and labeling all American citizens as potential threats. Then you combine that with what happened in the 1930s, wherein American citizens were also declared a threat, in the sense that if you had gold, then you would be a threat to the economic safety and security of the world. And this is part of the reason why Teddy Roosevelt did executive order, I can't remember it, but it was the executive order that basically said it was illegal to own gold. You had to turn over all gold and gold bullion to the Federal Reserve, and you would be issued gold certificates. So, this idea that we are going to be potentially labeled terrorists or enemies of the state is not new. What General Flynn is talking about here is, let me see if I can find a decent synopsis. Oh, it looks like it's a pretty quick one. So on September 17th, 2021, our nation will celebrate the 234th anniversary of our beloved U.S. Constitution. The fact that this document has lasted for such a period is a remarkable feat. Legal scholars have reviewed national constitutions that have been adopted since 1789 and concluded that they lasted on average only 17 years. But as I travel the country, Americans are asking me, so this must be just a reading from General Flynn here. As I travel through the country, Americans are asking me, quote, how much longer do we have before our constitutional protections are wiped away? How long before our nation descends into real tyranny? End quote. One friend went as far as saying, quote, if you criticize the administration, they call it hate speech. If you disagree with their actions, you call it domestic terrorists. You call them a domestic terrorist. My friend wasn't exaggerating. Reading the most recent Department of Homeland Security issuance on Friday of the nationwide terrorism alert entitled National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin, to be frank, I was stunned and found myself asking, have we, the United States of America, sunk to a new low? although we are approaching the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks against our nation, this terrorism alert does not say one word about Muslim extremism being a threat, and it barely mentions Al-Qaeda. So basically what we're talking about here is that they have put out a bulletin. This is from the Homeland Security Department, or Homeland Security, that was saying that it was going to basically become illegal for you to criticize the federal government. And they were going to impose some type of sanctions in some capacity. Now, this isn't any surprise to me, because what happens when you have an election irregularities where people start to question the confidence of the election is that now you have to maintain an illusion. You have a de facto leader who's come in and taken over the country, is declared himself leader, and you've got a coup that's happened, basically. And so in order to secure the coup's existence into the future, you need to squash dissenting opinion. So it's entirely understandable that the cabal, in their effort to try to further their agenda that they initiated last year, they have to make sure that nobody talks against what the fundamental beliefs that people are being initiated into through the media. The media serves as a way to regulate the belief substructure of a society. And our media is specifically designed to put out a false narrative so that people believe it, and then they guide their life decisions based on this false narrative. That's part of how mind control works, is through manipulation of beliefs and narratives. So, all right, let me see if I can get through one more, and then we're going to switch over to the private chat. We're going to talk about some cool stuff. All right, top Google engineer abandons company, reveals big tech rewrote algorithms to target Trump. That's pretty crazy. So this guy, the top Google engineer, is basically confirming what we all thought, which is something that they hinted at in the House of Cards, by the way. If you've ever seen the show House of Cards, basically what happens in the show is Frank Abagnale uses big tech to manipulate public perception so that he can get more votes. And this guy from Google is basically saying exactly the same thing. In another article, President Trump rips Bush, quote, "It was the worst decision in the history of our country when we decided to go to the Middle East." 100% agree with you there. In another article, watch President Trump, Biden isn't calling the shots. So this is something that Trump said. He basically hinted that there's a cabal behind the scenes acting as the puppet Biden, the puppet master, for Biden. And there you go. In another article, Great Reset World Economic Forum claims everyone will be ID'd and tracked by their heartbeat. That's something I showed you earlier. That's really disturbing. Now, is it disturbing in the sense that this has never been happening before? Well, no. I mean, one of the things that we learned from the documentary Shadowgate produced by Millie Weaver is that cell phones were invented to act as tracking devices and to basically augment and distort your perception of reality through social media. That's what these things are designed for. So when you're watching social media, when you're on Facebook, when you're on Twitter, your reality is being manipulated and distorted through various mechanisms. I don't have time to go into how that works, but let me just clarify. I'm not saying that like just flipping on Twitter, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're under mind control and you can't think for yourself anymore. No, it doesn't necessarily work that way. It's done through suggesting beliefs and values and your desire to fit in. If you believe that a lot of people believe something, that mid part of your brain is going to produce an overwhelming urge to want to buy into the belief, at the very least to not be public about your beliefs. So that all serves the manipulation of culture and society, which is part of their agenda. Actually, I only got 2 more left, so we're going to blast through everything. Amazon will pay you $10 for your palm print, but you might want to think twice. Yeah, no kidding. Apparently, Amazon wants your biometric information and your palm print for purchasing to make it easier and very convenient. Well, I'd be very careful because your biometric information is sold all the time. I mean, one of the ways that Facebook, as one example, makes money is they make a digital version of you that's so effective and good that governments can use it to make war game scenarios, and they sell your digital information, your digital identity, your digital facsimile to companies and organizations. to make money, and then they have the gall to charge you money for all sorts of things, and throw ads in your face. So yeah, I would be careful with this, but be reasonable too. If you need it for whatever reason, I don't think you not like giving your biometric information is necessarily going to stop a whole lot, because they've already got a lot of our biometric information. What we need to do is we need to do what we're doing now, which is talk to each other, form communities, get connected with each other, start forming valid defensive networks using the power of we the people. That's my solution I propose to you. And lastly, actually, that's it. All right, so with that, I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions on the YouTube stream, and then we will go to private. So while I'm looking for questions, if you are interested in joining the private chat, that's where we get to talk about all the stuff that I can't talk about. You just go to the description of this video on YouTube, click on subscribe star, sign up for as little as $3 a month. I have the link to the Zoom room right there at the top, and you can join. We're about to get into some cool stuff. Okay, so that's about it. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the private version. And yeah, there's one last thing I want to say, is that I am currently doing a series on magic and manifestation and things like this. Now, some people hear that and they're like, oh, you just get into like this woo-woo fantasy stuff. No, I'm actually talking about like the power of prayer, the power of energy healing, how we manifest things in our lives. So when I say magic, what magic is, the true definition of magic, as I've defined it, is the use of mind and will to manifest things to suit the desires of the person doing it. So it's really the science, the kind of spirit science, the wisdom of how to manifest things in your life, to do good things in your life, to be a moral and beneficial person. So there's a ton of information there that I'm putting out there. It's a huge set of information that I think is very beneficial, and people seem to really like it. So I want to let everybody know about that. Thank you so much, everybody. I will see you on the flip side in a couple weeks, and I will see all of you in the Zoom room in a moment. All right, we are now